My name is Landry Tucker. I am 73 years old, and I have spent 40 years calculating load-bearing limits for suspension bridges and skyscrapers. I believed that if you built a foundation strong enough, nothing could tear it down. I was wrong. I recently learned that the most dangerous structural failures don't happen in concrete or steel. They happen in the blood. I gave my daughter and her husband $842,000 of my life's savings to build their perfect world, and in return, they handed me a silence so loud it shattered my heart. They thought they were ghosting a helpless, senile old man who was just good for writing checks. They thought I was just a wallet with a pulse. But they forgot one critical detail, a detail buried in a decade of paperwork they never bothered to read. They didn't know that I am not just their benefactor. I am their landlord. And by this time tomorrow, the locks on their doors will change, and their world will collapse exactly as I designed it to. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. The workshop smelled of cedar sawdust and machine oil, a scent that had been my perfume for 3 decades of retirement. It was a clean smell, honest and unpretentious. I ran my hand along the grain of the walnut timber clamped to my workbench. It was smooth, sanded down to a finish that felt like satin against my calloused fingertips. This wasn't just wood. It was the side rail for a crib, hand-carved, dovetail joints. No screws, no nails. Just pure friction and geometry holding it together. It was a masterpiece of structural integrity, intended for a grandchild I hadn't met yet, but whom I assumed would be needing a bed soon, considering how long Audrey and Brock had been married. My phone sat on the drill press table, a black rectangle of silence. I wiped my hands on a shop rag, checking the time. 2 in the afternoon. Audrey would be on her lunch break. I had called 3 times in the last week with no answer, but today was different. Today I just wanted to hear the excitement in her voice about the wedding. I picked up the phone and dialed. It rang. Once, twice, 4 times. I was about to hang up, assuming she was in a meeting, when the line clicked open. What? The voice wasn't warm. It wasn't welcoming. It was breathless and annoyed, accompanied by the loud clatter of silverware and the hum of a busy restaurant. Audrey? I asked, keeping my tone light. It's Dad. I didn't catch you at a bad time, did I? I'm at lunch, Dad, she snapped. With clients. It's really busy. Is this an emergency? Is the house burning down? No emergency, I said, leaning back against the workbench. I hadn't heard from you in a while. I wanted to see how the final preparations were going. The big day is coming up fast, isn't it? I've got my suit pressed and ready. There was a pause on the line. A long, heavy pause that felt heavier than the oak beam sitting in the corner of my shop. I heard her sigh, a sharp exhalation of pure irritation. Dad, she said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. The wedding? Seriously? Well, yes, I chuckled nervously. It's next Saturday, isn't it? The 16th? I wanted to make sure I had the time right for the ceremony. Dad, she cut me off, her tone dripping with a strange mixture of pity and annoyance. The wedding was last weekend. The air in my workshop suddenly felt very thin. My grip on the phone tightened. What? No, the invitation said. We changed it, she said, rushing the words. It was a last-minute decision. Brock was stressed. I was stressed. We just decided to do a small thing. A micro-wedding, you know? Just close people. Very intimate. We didn't want to drag you out and make a fuss. Just close people, I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Audrey, I'm your father. Who is closer than your father? It's complicated, Dad, she hissed. Look, Brock's parents were in town, and his business partners. It was more of a networking thing in the end. It wasn't a family thing. You wouldn't have liked it anyway. It was loud. The music was terrible. We did you a favor. A favor, I whispered. Yes. Look, I have to go. My risotto is getting cold, and Brock is waving at me. We'll come by sometime next month, okay? We can look at photos. Bye. The line went dead. I stood there in the silence of my sanctuary, the phone still pressed to my ear. I looked at the walnut crib rail. I looked at the curve I had spent 40 hours perfecting. I looked at the empty space in the room where I had imagined my grandchild sleeping. She hadn't just forgotten to invite me. She had actively excluded me. Brock's parents were there. Business partners were there. But the man who had paid for the venue, the catering, the dress, and the flowers was considered too much of a fuss. I set the phone down on the workbench. I didn't scream. I didn't throw a chisel across the room. I simply turned off the lights, locked the heavy steel door of the workshop, and walked into the house that suddenly felt far too big for one old man. I bypassed the living room, with its framed photos of Audrey graduating, Audrey laughing, Audrey and Brock on their engagement trip. Those images, once sources of pride, now looked like evidence of a crime I had been too blind to see. I went straight to my study. This room was the command center of my life. Drafting tables, blueprints, and my computer. I sat down and woke the machine. The screen glowed blue, illuminating the wrinkles on my face. I opened a file named Tucker Family Support.xlsx. It was a spreadsheet I had started 5 years ago, right after Adeline died. She had been the heart of the house. I was just the wallet. When she passed, the requests for money had turned into a deluge. I had tracked every cent, not out of stinginess, but out of an engineer's need for data. I scrolled down the columns. The numbers were staggering. Row 45, March 2021. Bridge loan for Brock's crypto venture, $25,000. Status, defaulted. Row 52, July 2022, luxury SUV down payment. Safety for the future kids, $18,000. Row 60, November 2023, bailout for Audrey's maxed credit cards, $42,000. Row 78, June 2024, the wedding fund, $65,000. I stared at that last entry, $65,000. I had wired it 6 months ago. Audrey had sat on my couch, tears in her eyes, telling me she wanted a ceremony that would honor her mother's memory. She said she wanted white roses because Adeline loved white roses. They had taken the money. They had bought the roses. And they had left Adeline's husband sitting at home, staring at the wall. I went to the summary tab at the bottom. Total outflow, 2020-2025. 850 million. I read the number aloud. 842,000. It was a fortune. It was my retirement. It was the money I had planned to use to travel the world with Adeline. The money I had saved by driving a 10-year-old truck and fixing my own plumbing. But there was one number that stood out more than the rest. Row 12. August 2020, mortgage acquisition, $520,000. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking. I remembered that day clearly. Brock had come to me, sweating and pale. No bank would touch him. His credit score was in the double digits due to a bankruptcy he had forgotten to mention before the marriage. They were going to lose the dream house they had put an offer on. Audrey had begged. She said it was their start. I hadn't given them the cash. Adeline had made me promise never to give Brock a lump sum that large. He's a sieve, Landry, she had said. You pour water in, it pours out. If you want to help them, you hold the bucket. So I had bought the bucket. I opened a drawer in my filing cabinet, the one locked with a separate key. Inside was a thick manila envelope labeled Project Shelter. I pulled out the deed. The name on the title wasn't Brock Jacobson. It wasn't Audrey Jacobson. It was the Adeline Tucker Revocable Trust. I flipped through the pages until I found the lease agreement. It was standard boilerplate text, something Alana Rains, our family lawyer, had drawn up. It stated clearly that the occupants were tenants at will, paying a monthly sum that covered taxes and insurance. I looked at the signature at the bottom, Audrey's sprawling, hasty handwriting. She hadn't read it. I remembered her laughing as she signed it, saying, "Dad, you and your paperwork. Just tell me where to sign so we can get the keys." She thought it was a formality for the loan. She thought she was the owner. She was wrong. I couldn't stay in the office. The numbers were making me nauseous. I needed physical activity. I decided to do the one thing I had been avoiding for 3 years, clearing out Adeline's storage boxes in the attic. The attic was stiflingly hot, smelling of dry pine and old memories. I moved aside stacks of National Geographics and holiday decorations until I found the plastic bin labeled Adeline's Personal Keep. I sat on the floorboards, my knees popping, and pried off the lid. Inside were the artifacts of the woman I had loved for 45 years, her silk scarves, her reading glasses, and right on top, a leather-bound journal. I picked it up. The leather was soft, worn down by her hands. I hadn't been able to bring myself to read it before. It felt like an invasion of privacy, even after death. But today, I felt desperate for her voice. I opened it to the bookmark. The entry was dated 2 months before she died. Her handwriting, usually perfect cursive, was shaky. The cancer had been aggressive by then. June 12, 2020. Audrey came by today. She didn't ask how I was feeling. She just talked about the house they want. She talked about the pool. She talked about the neighborhood. She looks at Landry like he's a bank vault she's waiting to crack open. It breaks my heart, but I know who she has become. Brock has poisoned her, or maybe he just watered the weeds that were already there. Landry is too good. He sees the little girl in pigtails. He doesn't see the wolf. I spoke to Dominic today. We set up the trust. Landry thinks it's just for tax purposes. I didn't have the heart to tell him it's a shield. He's going to need it. When I'm gone, they will eat him alive if he lets them. I have to make sure he holds the leash, even if he doesn't want to. I closed the book. A single tear tracked through the dust on my cheek. She had known. She had seen the greed in our daughter's eyes when I had only seen need. She hadn't just left me money. She had left me a weapon. A shield, I whispered to the empty attic. You left me a shield. I stood up, clutching the diary. The sadness that had been weighing me down since the phone call began to evaporate. In its place, something cold and hard began to form. It was the same feeling I got when I inspected a building foundation and found a critical fracture. You don't cry over a cracked beam. You condemn the structure before it kills someone. I pulled my phone out and scrolled through the contacts until I found the number for Rains and Chang, attorneys at law. I pressed call. Rains and Chang, how may I direct your call? This is Landry Tucker, I said, my voice steady for the first time all day. I need to speak to Alana. Tell her it's time to activate the Adeline Protocol. The offices of Rains and Chang were on the top floor of a glass tower downtown, overlooking the city sprawl. Alana Rains was waiting for me in the conference room. She was nothing like her father, Dominic. Dominic had been a rumpled, soft-spoken man who smelled of pipe tobacco. Alana was sharp angles, tailored suits, and terrifying competence. She stood up as I entered, offering a firm handshake. "Landry," she said, "I've been expecting this call for 2 years." "You knew?" I asked, sitting down at the long mahogany table. "My father left me detailed instructions," she replied, opening a thick binder in front of her. "He called it the break glass in case of emergency file. He said you were a patient man, but everyone has a breaking point." "They had a wedding?" I said, staring at the polished wood. "Yeah, they spent $65,000 of my money on a party, and they didn't invite me." Alana didn't gasp. She didn't offer empty platitudes. She simply nodded, her eyes narrowing. "That is a material breach of the emotional contract, Landry. But we deal in legal contracts. Let's look at where we stand." She slid a document across the table. It was a summary of the promissory notes. "Every time you gave them money, the cars, the vacations, the bailouts, you had them sign a receipt," Alana said. "My father drafted those receipts very carefully. They aren't gifts. They are demand notes, callable at any time by the lender, you." "And the house?" I asked. "The house is the ace in the hole," she said, tapping a blue folder. "They are legally tenants. They have no equity. They have no ownership. They have a month-to-month lease that requires them to maintain good familial standing with the landlord. It's a clause my father inserted. It's vague, but in the context of a family trust, it's powerful." "Audrey thinks she owns it," I said. "She talks about her garden, her renovations." "Tenants often confuse occupancy with ownership," Alana said dryly. "The trust owns the property. The trust pays the mortgage to the bank. They pay rent to the trust. The fact that the rent equals the mortgage payment is irrelevant. They have been paying for the privilege of living there, nothing more." She leaned forward. "Landry, you have the power to evict them. You have the power to demand repayment of $320,000 in personal loans immediately. You have the power to bankrupt them by Friday." I looked at the documents. It was a nuclear option. It was total destruction. "I don't want to destroy them," I said softly. "I wanted them to be family." "They made their choice," Alana said. "Now you have to make yours. Do you want to be their victim, or do you want to be their father? Because sometimes being a father means teaching the lesson nobody else will." I thought about the empty crib in my workshop. I thought about Adeline's diary. Protect yourself from your own heart. "Do it," I said. "Start the process." The next 3 weeks were a study in silence. I didn't call Audrey. I didn't text Brock. I simply went about my routine. I worked in my shop. I sanded the crib. I cooked solitary dinners. On their end, the silence was initially a relief. They were probably glad the annoying old man wasn't bothering them. They were likely enjoying their new boat. I had seen the charge on the shared credit card I still monitored, but hadn't canceled yet. Sea Ray Sundancer, $40,000. They had bought a boat a week after the wedding they excluded me from. But then, the gears of the trust began to turn. The first domino fell on a Tuesday. The property management company, a shell entity Alana used to handle the mortgage payments, sent an automated notice. Notice of default. Audrey had missed the payment. Again. She usually missed it, assuming I would cover it or that the bank, me, would be lenient. Usually, I would silently transfer the funds from my personal account to the trust to cover the shortfall. Not this time. This time, the automated system did exactly what a real bank would do. It triggered a 48-hour cure notice. I was in the garden pruning Adeline's hydrangeas when my phone erupted. Audrey calling. I let it ring. I snipped a dead bloom. It rang again, and again. Finally, on the fourth attempt, I answered. "Hello? Dad, pick up the phone?" Her voice was a shriek of panic. "I just did, Audrey. What is it?" "The mortgage. We got a letter. A red letter. It says we're in default. They say if we don't pay by tomorrow at 5 p.m., they're starting foreclosure proceedings." "That sounds serious," I said calmly, examining a leaf for aphids. "Serious? It's a disaster. Brock says it must be a mistake. We paid, well, we almost paid. We were going to pay next week when his commission check clears. You have to call them." "Call who?" "The bank. You know the people. You set it all up. Call them and tell them to back off. Tell them the check is coming." "I can't do that, Audrey." "What do you mean you can't? You always fix this. Just transfer the money like you usually do. We're a little short this month because of the wedding expenses." The audacity took my breath away. She was using the cost of the party I wasn't invited to as an excuse to borrow money from me to pay for the house I owned. "The wedding expenses," I repeated. "Right. The micro-wedding." "Dad, stop being petty. This is our house. We could lose it." "Well," I said, my voice hardening into steel, "that's how mortgages work, Audrey. If you don't pay, you don't stay." "Are you saying you're not going to help?" Her voice dropped an octave into that dangerous, threatening tone she used when she didn't get her way. "Dad, if we lose this house, you're never going to see us again. You're never going to see your future grandchildren." There it was. The ultimate card. The hostage negotiation. "The family will handle it," I said cryptically. "What does that mean? Are you sending the money?" "I said the family will handle it. Goodbye, Audrey." I hung up. My hand was shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I had just cut the safety line. 2 days passed. The deadline came and went. The trust's automated system sent the official notice of acceleration. The entire balance of the mortgage was now due. I expected them to storm my gates. I expected Brock to come over with a baseball bat. Instead, I got a text message. "Audrey, Dad, we're so sorry about the phone call. We're just so stressed. We love you. Please come over for dinner tonight. We have huge news, miracle news. Please." I stared at the screen. Miracle news. I knew exactly what that meant, or what they wanted me to think it meant. They were going to play the pregnancy card. It was their last desperate play to unlock the vault. I forwarded the text to Alana. "Alana, be careful, Landry. This is a trap. Do not agree to anything verbally. Go, but wear a wire if you have to." I didn't need a wire. I needed to look them in the eye. I needed to see if there was any redemption left in them. "I'll be there," I texted back. I arrived at the house at 7:00 p.m. The house looked beautiful. The lawn was manicured, paid for by me. The shutters were freshly painted, paid for by me. Brock's new F-150 Raptor was in the driveway, down payment by me. Audrey opened the door. She was wearing a floral dress, her hair done up perfectly. She threw her arms around me. "Daddy, I'm so glad you came." It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. She ushered me into the dining room. The table was set with the good china, Adeline's china, which I had given Audrey as a housewarming gift. Brock was there, pouring wine. He looked humbled, or at least he was acting the part. He shook my hand with 2 hands, pumping it enthusiastically. "Landry, good to see you, sir. Here, take the head of the table." They sat me down. They fed me steak and potatoes. They talked about the weather. They talked about sports. They avoided the elephant in the room, the foreclosure notice, until the dessert course. Audrey reached across the table and took my hand. Her eyes were shimmering with tears. Dad, the reason we were so stressed, the reason we've been so distant, it's because we've been trying. And we finally got good news. She looked at Brock, who beamed. I'm pregnant, Dad, she whispered. You're going to be a grandfather. For a second, the earth stopped spinning. My heart leapt. This was it. The dream. A baby. A new life. Maybe I'd been too hard on them. Maybe the stress was real. Maybe this was a chance to start over. Really? I choked out. Audrey, that's wonderful. It's a miracle, Brock said, leaning in. But Dad, the stress. The doctor says she needs absolute calm, and this house situation, this bank thing, it's killing her. It's putting the baby at risk. Audrey squeezed my hand. We just need this one thing fixed, Daddy. If you can just pay off the arrears, we can refinance later. But we need $40,000 to stop the foreclosure. For the baby, please. I looked at her pleading eyes. I felt my resolve cracking. A grandchild. My blood. Adeline's blood. How could I say no to that? I need to use the restroom, I stammered, standing up. I'm overwhelmed. Of course, Dad, Audrey smiled. Take your time. I walked down the hallway to the guest bathroom. My mind was racing. I was ready to write the check. I was ready to surrender. But as I passed the home office, the room that used to be a nursery in my imagination, I saw the door was slightly ajar. A breeze from the open window blew a stack of papers off the desk onto the floor. I stepped in to pick them up. Habit. I was a tidy man. I bent down and gathered the papers. My eyes scanned the top document. It wasn't a baby ultrasound. It wasn't a doctor's note. It was a bill of sale. Item, 2025 Mastercraft NXT-22 Speedboat. Name, The Good Life. Price, $115,000. Down payment, $40,000. Date, yesterday. I froze. I looked at the date again. Yesterday, the day after the default notice. They didn't need $40,000 for the house. They had $40,000, and they had used it to buy a boat. A boat they named The Good Life, while they were begging me to save their home. And then I saw the brochure underneath it, a travel agency itinerary. Maldives Baby Moon Package, adults only. There was no baby. You don't book a high-speed wakeboarding boat and a booze cruise vacation if you're a high-risk pregnancy. The lie was so massive, so calculated, it sucked the air out of my lungs. They had weaponized my deepest desire, a grandchild, to cover up their latest toy. I stood up. I didn't feel sad anymore. I didn't feel conflicted. I felt nothing. I walked into the bathroom, washed my face with cold water, and looked in the mirror. The old, soft Landry was gone. In his place was the engineer, and I was looking at a structure that was too rotten to save. I walked back into the dining room. They were smiling at each other, clinking their wine glasses, celebrating the victory, celebrating the con. Everything okay, Dad? Audrey asked. Fine, I said. Just old bladders. I didn't sit down. I have to go, I said. What? But we haven't had cake, Brock protested. And we need to talk about the transfer details. I'll handle the house, I said, just like I promised. Oh, thank God, Audrey exhaled, rubbing her flat stomach. You're the best, Daddy. You really are. By the way, I said, pausing at the door. Congratulations on The Good Life. Audrey froze. What? The Good Life, I repeated, staring specifically at Brock. Great name. Hope it floats better than your finances? I walked out the door before they could respond. I heard Brock's chair scrape against the floor, but I was already in my truck. I peeled out of the driveway, leaving tire marks on the pavement I had paid for. 2 days later, the war turned physical. I was at the hardware store buying new locks, high-security deadbolts. I knew what was coming, and I intended to secure my property once the eviction was served. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from my home security system. Motion detected. Living room. I pulled up the camera feed. It was Brock. He had broken the glass on the back door. He was stumbling around my living room, holding a crowbar. He looked drunk. He was tearing books off the shelves, smashing vases. "Where is it?" I heard him scream at the empty room. "Where's the damn book?" He was looking for the ledger. He knew I kept a record. He thought if he destroyed the paper, he destroyed the debt. He was a child, thinking that if he closed his eyes, the monster would disappear. I didn't call the police. Not yet. I watched on the screen as he found the locked filing cabinet in my study. He pried it open with the crowbar, metal screeching against metal. He grabbed the Tucker family support folder. He grabbed the black leather ledger. He stumbled to the fireplace, threw the books in, and lit a match. I watched the flames catch. I watched him laugh, a slurred, ugly sound. "Burn, you old miser," he shouted. "Try to collect now." He watched it burn to ash. Then he left, leaving my back door wide open. I drove home slowly. When I arrived, the house smelled of smoke and cheap whiskey. I looked at the ashes in the fireplace. Brock thought he had won. He thought he had destroyed the evidence. I walked to my computer. I opened the cloud drive. File, Tucker, family, support, digitized, .pdf. Status, uploaded 2 hours ago. Every receipt, every signature, every page of the ledger. I had scanned them all the day I met with Alana. Brock hadn't destroyed the evidence. He had just added a felony charge to his resume. Burglary, arson, destruction of property. I had him on video. I saved the footage to a thumb drive. I put the thumb drive in my pocket. "Checkmate," I whispered. The formal eviction notice was served the next morning by a process server. Along with it was a summons to a mandatory mediation meeting at Rains and Chang. They showed up at 10 a.m. on Friday. I was already seated at the head of the long table. Alana was to my right. Audrey and Brock walked in. They looked terrible. Audrey's eyes were puffy. Brock looked hungover and smug. He was wearing a suit that was too tight, trying to look intimidating. "This is harassment," Brock announced, throwing his keys on the table. "You can't evict us. It's our house. And we know you don't have the paperwork to prove any debt, Landry. We know about the fire." He smirked at me. He was practically winking. "Please sit down," Alana said, her voice like ice. "We're not sitting," Audrey spat. "My father is having a senile episode. He thinks we owe him money. He thinks he owns our home. Dad, stop this. It's embarrassing. I'm pregnant, for God's sake." "Drop the act, Audrey," I said. My voice was quiet, but it filled the room. "I saw the receipt for the Mastercraft. I know about the Maldives." Audrey turned pale. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "And as for the paperwork," I said, turning to Brock, "you're right. The physical ledger is gone. Someone broke into my house and burned it." Brock crossed his arms, grinning. "Tragic. Sounds like you have no case." Alana pressed a button on her laptop. The large screen behind us flickered to life. A high-definition video began to play. It showed Brock, clear as day, smashing the cabinet. It showed him lighting the fire. It showed him laughing. The grin slid off Brock's face like sludge. That's That's deep fake, he stammered. That's AI. It's 4K security footage, Alana corrected, and it's already been sent to the district attorney. But we can discuss the criminal charges later. Right now, let's talk about the debt. She clicked the next slide. It was a PDF of the signed receipt for the wedding money. I, Audrey Jacobson, acknowledge receipt of $65,000, agreeing to terms of familial goodwill. You digitized them, Brock whispered. I'm an engineer, Brock, I said. See, I believe in backups. Alana spent the next hour systematically dismantling their lives. She projected every receipt: the car, the crypto loan, the credit card bailout. Total personal debt, Alana announced, $322,000, due immediately under the acceleration clause triggered by your hostility and criminal actions against the lender. We don't have that kind of money, Audrey shrieked. You know we don't. Then we take the assets, Alana said. We will garnish wages. We will seize the truck. We will seize the boat, which, by the way, you purchased fraudulently while claiming insolvency. And the house? Brock asked, his voice trembling. You can't take the house. It's in the trust. Exactly, Alana said. She pulled out the heavy binder. The trust owns the house. You are tenants. She slid the lease agreement across the table, the one Audrey had signed without reading. Clause 14, termination, Alana read. The landlord, the trust, may terminate this tenancy immediately upon any criminal act committed by the tenant against the trustee, Landry Tucker. Alana looked at Brock. Burglary and arson count as criminal acts, Mr. Jacobson. You own it? Audrey whispered, looking at me with horror. All this time? You were our landlord? I was your safety net, I corrected her. I bought the mortgage so the bank wouldn't foreclose on you 5 years ago. I kept a roof over your head while you bought toys and played pretend. I asked for nothing but respect, and you gave me nothing but lies. But the baby, Audrey cried, reverting to the lie. You'd evict a pregnant woman? There is no baby, Audrey, I said tiredly. I saw the travel itinerary. Stop lying, just stop. The room went silent. The truth hung heavy in the air. They were exposed, naked in their greed. You're a monster, Audrey hissed. How could you do this to your family? How could you ruin us? I stood up slowly. I walked over to the window and looked out at the city. I didn't ruin you, Audrey, I said, turning back to face them. I built a foundation for you. I poured everything I had into it. But you kept chipping away at the supports. You took out the rebar to sell for scrap. You mixed the concrete with sand to save money. And now, gravity is doing what gravity always does. I looked at Brock. You have 24 hours to vacate the property. The locks will be changed tomorrow at noon. The police will be present to ensure you don't burn anything else down. Dad, please, Audrey sobbed, the fight finally leaving her. Where will we go? You have a boat, I said. It sleeps 4. It's named The Good Life, isn't it? Go live it. I nodded to Alana. I'm done here. I walked out of the conference room. I didn't look back. I heard Audrey weeping, a sound that would have once torn me apart. Now, it just sounded like the settling of a house that had finally collapsed. I took the elevator down to the lobby and stepped out into the cool autumn air. I felt lighter. The weight of the secret. The weight of the deception. The weight of trying to save people who didn't want to be saved. It was all gone. The next day, I went to the house on Maple Lane. The police were there watching as Brock and Audrey loaded boxes into a U-Haul. They didn't look at me. They just worked, heads down,